Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Playmore69, aka Michael, and this is the All in All Podcast, episode 2. And I just wanted to say before we start, we have made podcast history, actually. This is something I was doing some research on before I obviously started the episode 2, is that 12% of all podcasts only publish a single episode. This is something that I knew the number was quite high when it came to one episode podcasts or podcasts that really don't last, but I didn't know it was that high of a percentage. And I also found out that 6% haven't made it past 2 episodes. And half of all podcasts have not made it past 14 episodes. Just some interesting podcast statistics there. I obviously am trying to upload this podcast weekly. And you're probably wondering why this podcast is actually uploaded only a couple days after episode 1. And that's really just comes down to the reason of why I recorded episode 1 in the middle of the week compared to the weekend, because that's when I'm trying to get my upload schedule down. It really just comes down to my mic setup and recording in Audacity. I was having some audio problems and really pushed the podcast back until the middle of the week. And, I think when starting like a journey, doing a podcast or anything like that, you want to start it as soon as possible. You want to start it so you can get the first foot forward. I always think that getting the first foot forward in a journey is one of the hardest steps you'll take because you're actually starting the journey. And I'm glad I'm finally starting the journey for this podcast, obviously, recording episode 1, finally putting it on YouTube was so big for me. I'm so glad I did it because I think I've doubted myself for years. I talked about last podcast, I've doubted myself for years actually coming back and doing content creation. So it's been quite incredible, at least in a feeling for me, to come back and actually start recording podcasts and doing content creation. It's felt great. And also why this podcast will be uploaded, I think Sunday, so it will be the 24th of October 2021, basically comes down to I'm trying to be consistent, but I rather upload more than once a week than less than once a week, because what I could have done is just waited until next weekend, which would have been the end of October, and then recorded another episode, but then that would have left a week and a half gap or between, instead of just leaving like a couple of days. So, I'm trying to get this project off the ground of the podcast and trying to record, if I have time, I will record more than once a week. I actually like doing the podcast. To me, it's really fun and fulfilling, and I'm having a great time doing it. So if I am able to record 2 episodes a week, I'll do 2 episodes a week. So beyond that, that's just some quick podcast statistics and basically, obviously the plan for the podcast moving forward. So, be uploading this Sunday, which will be the 24th of October 2021. And hopefully next episode is scheduled for next weekend. But I'll have to wait and see, obviously. So anyways, the title of this episode is A Global Fertility Crisis. The first link down below should be the link to the video that I'm referencing. It's from After Skool, and this is school spelled Skool, kind of weird, but So this channel I've actually come across before, but I never really paid much attention to it. I think they cover some interesting topics, have some interesting talks, but overall, I don't think I've paid this channel too much mind. But recently they uploaded a video. It was uploaded October 12th, 2021. And this video is obviously titled A Global Fertility Crisis. And I think that's what I'll be titling this podcast. Because basically it's going to be a breakdown, not really the video of itself, but the concepts in the video attributing to the global fertility crisis. So this video is basically described by, when it comes to the facets of the global fertility crisis, is Dr. Shauna Swan. So they talk about her briefly in the video, and there's obviously a little bit of a description in the description of the video. Basically, what you need to know is she is a reproductive epistemologist and a professor of environmental and medical and public health. So when actually talking about this, that she started a study about 50 years ago. So this was in 1973 she started this study, and this is detailing the sperm count in Western men mainly, and it had dropped over 50%. Now, if those numbers ring a bell to you, I think everyone has heard, or at least most people in research, of the 1% rule. It's usually either really good or really bad. So in 50 years, sperm count in men has dropped, in Western men, has dropped 1% per year. So that's 50%, which they're about 50% of what they were 50 years ago. Not good. And basically, there are four main contributing factors, lifestyle factors, if you will, for this. So these four are obesity, smoking, drinking, and stress. These are the four lifestyle factors that attribute to lower sperm count. And I actually have a lot of studies here I'll be linking, and a lot of different things I'll be linking in the description, but we will start off here with obesity and overweight. So the first link will be from the WHO, or well, the second link, the first link should be the video, and then the second link will be the WHO. So this WHO article, or really fact sheet, details really good information when it comes to obesity worldwide. So a good fact is in 2016, more than 1.9 billion adults, that's billion with a B, 18 years or older, were overweight. That is really an insane statistic to kind of conceptualize, because when you think about the world population, we have about 7.9 billion people. And 1.9 billion of those people are considered overweight or obese, which is just crazy to think about, at least from a conception standpoint. But overall, continuing on, most of the world's population lives in countries where overweight and obesity kills more than underweight people. It's also an interesting fact. And I think the biggest one, which is probably the most important here, is that the worldwide obesity rate has nearly tripled from 1975 to 2016. So that means in a 40-year period or a 41-year period, obesity has tripled, which is one of the biggest lifestyle factors when it comes to sperm count and global fertility. So right now we're 1 for 4, or 1 for 1. So we have 3 more factors to look at. I will also link one more study along with this, and this is what is the driving global obesity trends. This is globalism or modernism. This is a really highly high level article, I would say. Definitely would recommend a read if you have the time. It also shows some great figures when it comes to this, and I would highly recommend reading it. It was also published in 2019, so this is a little bit newer than the WHO article or actually the WHO article was updated in 2021, but this was done in 2019. It's really good. Definitely recommend reading it, but it would be a whole podcast in itself if I was to go over the full thing. And I don't want to spoil anything, so I would definitely recommend, if you would like to check it out, check it out. So the next one is alcohol. So I was actually kind of on the fence with this one. I kind of predicted before I was doing research on all 4 of these topics is, like, I believe obesity would definitely be going up in the world, but I thought alcohol would kind of be going down, and that's actually not the case. So the first link for the alcohol would be the WHO article. This article states that worldwide 3 million deaths every year are a result from harmful use of alcohol, representing 5.3% of all deaths. Now in this article, it basically details that alcoholism is basically really bad from, in society and why it's rising from a society standpoint, and their response is that basically lowering the level of alcohol would be better for society from an overall standpoint. It doesn't really show many statistics when it comes to why it is rising or how much it has risen. So I will also link along with that the Lancet study, which is really good. This is the global alcohol exposure between 1990 and 2017 is what they looked at, and I will read a little bit of their background, methods, and findings. So at least the background on the study is that alcoholism or alcohol exposure is a big risk factor when it comes to society as a whole on a global level. The methods that they looked at were the adult alcohol per capita consumption. So this was the liters per alcohol consumed by per adult, which was actually over 15, so it wasn't over 18, so keep that in mind. In 2017, 20% of adults had heavy alcohol drinkers compared to the 1990s where it was at 18.5%, and this is prevalent to increase to 23% by 2030. So this study, I would definitely recommend looking through it, but beyond that point, the really gist of it is that alcohol and alcohol exposure has increased per capita when it comes to people from a global standpoint. So that's 2 for 2. That's obesity is rising from a worldwide standpoint, and alcohol and alcoholism is rising from an overall standpoint as well. The next one is smoking, and this one I really thought would be going down. I basically said, like, there's no way these 4 lifestyles, obesity, alcohol, smoking, and stress, are all going up at the same time, which is actually not the case. And the WHO actually gives some great numbers when it comes to this. So this study for smoking was actually conducted from 2000 to 2018. So I'll read a little bit from this article here. So during nearly the past 2 decades, overall global tobacco use has fallen from 1.397 billion in 2000 to 1.337 billion in 2018. So this is approximately by 60 million people, the WHO reported, which actually sounds quite good. If you actually just read that, it's like, oh, it's going down. That's perfect. But reading a little bit further shows that this is largely driven by females, which in the years from 2000 to 2018 has fallen by over 100 million people. But over the same period, male tobacco use has grown over 40 million users from 2000 to 2018. Those statistics obviously do not help the global fertility rate, because obviously if smoking is increasing in men, well, that is only hurting the sperm count overall, and the global fertility rate is still worsening. So that means we are 3 for 3 so far in the 4 factors when it comes to the global fertility rate. So obesity is increasing, alcohol is increasing, and smoking is increasing, which leaves the last one of stress. Now, I don't think I need to show you studies to basically detail that people are stressed nowadays, and that's for a wide variety of reasons, but I will be linking 3 links down below when it comes to this. The first one being Gallup, or from Gallup.com. This is measuring the stress causes, experiences, and outcomes over the world. So they actually have a nice chart here, and this is a chart that was done or has data from 2006 all the way to 2020, and this shows the percentage of people who have felt stressed yesterday worldwide. So in 2006 it was at 29%. So 29% of people said that they felt stressed yesterday. Nowadays the percentage of stress, or at least in 2020, was 40%. That's an 11% increase over 14 years. Quite high. And I don't think anyone needs to really explain why. I mean, we have the COVID pandemic in 2020. We also have the economic recession at least in the United States, and it did affect other places too in 2008 and 2009, which risen as well. Also, I wanted to detail the 4 sources that they measured for stress. So these 4 sources being money, work, family responsibilities, and health concerns. The next article I believe to be one of the best ones that I will link, and this is the Stress Statistics of 2020, How Common is Stress and Who It Is Most Affecting by Single Care. And this is really well put together. It's basically a combination of a lot of studies put into one article, which is really easy when it comes to reading and looking at the data. So the first one I wanted to touch on is the stress statistics worldwide. So this is from the Gallup studies in 2019, it looks like, and it details the most stressful countries based on a percentage. And this was basically the question asked of how much stress did you feel yesterday? And the answers were a lot. The highest stressed country was actually Greece at 59% of citizens saying a lot. And the United States of America was actually tied for 4th place on the highest stressed countries at 55%. Scrolling down a little farther, we have the stress by age, which I think is quite interesting. So basically, people from all ages were asked to rate their stress level from a day-to-day on a 1 to 10 scale. And Gen Z actually rated the highest at 6.1. Millennials came in at 5.6. Gen X was 5.2, and baby boomers were 4.3, and all older adults were only 3.3, which actually suggests that the younger you are, the more stress you have, at least, or the higher you rate it. Stress was also rated between men and women, with women rating it at a 5.1 out of 10 and men rating it at a 4.4 out of 10. I will also link one final article when it comes to stress, and this is from Business News Daily, basically detailing work-related stresses in people's jobs and how it affects them. It's also mentioned in this article that the WHO classifies stress as the health epidemic of the 21st century. And those are the 4 detailed lifestyle factors when it comes to the global fertility rate. Those all 4 were obviously researched, and data is backed up on all of them, which means we went 4 for 4 on the lifestyles increasing. So after doing the research for all of those 4 topics, now I can kind of give my opinion on the podcast, and obviously beyond this point it'll be more opinionated with my sort of theories on this and why these 4 are increasing, and maybe some other factors to go along with that. It's also touched on in this video the birth rates globally, which currently they sit at about 2.3. And 2.1 is the quote-unquote replacement rate. That is basically the rate at which we need to produce humans in order to maintain the population we are at currently. And the reason it needs to be at 2.1 is to account for things like infertility and diseases taking people out or not allowing them to have kids. And 2.3, the rate we are at right now globally, is plenty to still help us grow at the rate we're growing at. So the current estimates is that we will reach 10 billion around 2050, and we should max out at around 2090 to 2100 at about 10.9 billion. After that, we should start the slow decline as the global population starts to decline. And I think that that's where it gets very interesting. Population decline on a global level or even on a country level has always interested me. And obviously in my lifetime or in many of your lifetimes, we won't get to see the global population rate actually start declining. But I think it gets really interesting beyond that point, because in order to have healthy societies, you need to have the youngest people be the majority of the population. Basically meaning that the older people in, your society, basically the people that are, already retired, those need to be the most few people, because obviously the people working support the people that are retired, and the people that are younger need to be more than the people that are working. So then when they replace the people that are working, the people that are working currently, when they retire, there will be enough people to support them. So that's kind of why even a stagnant population might not be as good for many societies. And that's where it gets really interesting, at least to me, because when we hit that point, we will, maybe not in my lifetime or your lifetime, but around 2090 to 2100, we will reach the point where the global population is not increasing anymore. And I guess my kind of question is, what happens to the world governments? The governments around the world, will they start mandating having kids? Will that be pushed on you as well? Because, I mean, I think the governments know this better than probably me or anyone else, is they know they need a big young population, and as that starts to decrease, they start having less of that young population in their country. How much of a push will it be for the people in their country to actually have kids? And I think I'll get into one of the factors that I think is a big one but is not talked about as much, and this is something that I actually tried to find a study on, but actually wasn't able to. And this is public acceptance or social acceptance. Basically, from what I feel, now this is purely anecdotal, this is not from any of the studies or anything that I've found, but this is just personally my belief as a person who is a part of the Gen Z generation, is I don't think a lot of value or necessary good is looked at or derived from having kids. At least that's my belief and my perception when it comes to people from the Gen Z generation. Just do not put the same value as people from past generations on for having kids. And this could be from a multitude of reasons. I think if you really look at it from like a society standpoint, you can look at, like, in the 1950s and 60s in the United States, at least, it was the American dream to have a wife, 2 or 3 kids, white picket fence. Sounds great. But I don't think that is the quote unquote American dream, or basically situation that people would want to live in nowadays. And I have to say, I share similar opinions when it comes to Gen Z, is that I think I have very negative opinions on kids as well, or at least having them. To me, I don't think I ever want to have kids, nor do I think it is a good. I mean, I know it's a good from a societal standpoint of, increasing the population, which is helping society grow as a whole. But for me as an individual, I don't derive value from me having a kid. I just look at it as more responsibility and something that is quite hard to do, something quite hard to get right as well. I know that there are a lot of benefits of having kids, but personally, I think I share the same kind of opinions when it comes to having kids as a typical Gen Zer would. Hello, everyone. I'm back, and this section of the podcast is being added in post. And I just wanted to say a quick sorry for this podcast not going the full hour or around an hour, which I typically try to hit. This is basically because a big section of my audio was totally messed up. I don't exactly know why it was messed up, but there was some weird background noise that was clearly distorting my voice and really messed it up. So that cut out like 25 minutes of audio. This would have been around a 50-minute podcast, but I will try to recap of what I said in that section. Basically, what that section I talked about the video. So this is back to that after school video, and this is the second part of the conversation with it, which is talking about the phthalates, which are the plastics in our drinks or foods that we consume. And these plastics are really found everywhere because if you think about it, when it comes to like plastic containers, we use that for, our bottled water or the food we get in that. And these little plastics can stick in our systems and affect a wide range of things like sperm count or periods for women. The video also touches on the chemicals that are put into our foods, and at least from the US standards, these are regulated by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. And it's also quite interesting when you look at things like that, because the FDA has something called the acceptable amounts. And this is basically, of course, the acceptable amount of chemicals or plastics that could be put in your food that are deemed safe to consume. But after it is all added up, like for an extended period of time, is that when they implemented these probably, 50, 60 years ago, they didn't see much of an effect. But obviously now in 2021, people have been consuming highly processed foods with all sorts of chemicals and plastics with them that obviously we can see the effects now over just 2 generations of people, because this is too fast of a spike to be considered an evolutionary trait. So that was about it for the big topic of this podcast, which was the global fertility crisis. I hoped everyone enjoyed the topic. I found it very interesting, and especially from what I found interesting for a while was population decline. And for at least the past couple of years with the population decline, I basically attributed it to the internet and social media, but I never really considered obesity or smoking or things like alcohol. I never really saw those as too much of a factor because I just thought that we have progressed to a point to where we could push as a societal standard, hey, let's not do these bad things, because not only are they having negative impacts to have kids, they're also very negatively impacting you as an individual. But that's besides the point. Regardless, I found this topic quite enjoyable to discuss, and I hope everyone found enjoyable listening to it. Additionally, I'd like to apologize for the shorter podcast this week, but I do feel at least a little bit better that I was able to upload this on Sunday, so I didn't even wait a full week to upload this podcast. So I might, if I am able to record 2 podcasts a week, I might not push for 2 hours on each one. I might just push for 1 hour for one of them, and then the other one can go as long as it can go. But I will try to record more than once a week because honestly, I do like the podcast, and I do like, obviously, doing as much as I can. I don't want to just restrict myself to once a week, but I'll have to wait and see how it goes. I've tried to get the scheduling down to a good day. Basically, my plan is to record the podcast Saturday night, edit it, and upload it Sunday. So that's really my goal for now. So the upload schedule should be every Sunday. And if I am able to record an episode throughout the week, it could go up whenever. It could be Monday. It could be Monday through Friday. Honestly, I have no set date in mind, but I will try to come up with good topics in order to cover for the podcast, and I'll really just cover what I find interesting, but I do have some lined up, like for instance, dating. I know that that will be, well, at least dating in the modern times when it comes to online dating and how that affects basically dating overall in relationships and the decline in dating. That's also a big one that I probably will cover in that future episode as well. I've also had thoughts of doing a COVID episode. I don't know if that would be too controversial or not to do that, but I really do want to do that. My only fear is that YouTube could look at that podcast and take it down, or they could flag my videos or something. COVID is such a controversial topic that even just putting it in the title, no matter like even if you're speaking, I want to say what they want to hear about COVID, you're still going to get some sort of flack from YouTube. So I don't know if I'll do a COVID episode, but it has definitely been on my radar for a while. I might do something along the lines of COVID, though, is maybe like a pandemic episode. So, like doing an episode where I can recount what I did in the pandemic and how I basically lived through it and was able to be super productive in my college and, get multiple degrees and certifications along with that and advance my career a lot, even though socially I did absolutely nothing like most people. But I'm still trying to come up with more topics for the podcast because even if I only record once a week, I still have to have a good topic for that week. So I have to stay on top of topics. I'm also looking for ways to improve the podcast. I know I'm only on episode 2, but upload schedule is one thing. There are also a lot of different other ways I can improve the podcast. I think one of those ways is expanding to different platforms. I've been trying to think about expanding to other platforms other than YouTube, because I know there are other podcasting places that on the internet. Some of those being like Spotify, Apple Podcast, SoundCloud, stuff like that. And I know there's like plenty more that I don't know of, but if I am really trying to kind of promote my podcast, that's what I would do. If I wanted to become popular, I would be on all of the other platforms, but I have thought about that a little bit, and I think it really just comes down to I started as a YouTuber, and I don't want to say like I'll die as a YouTuber, but like I started here and I want to continue to stay here, and I feel like expanding to other platforms, even though that's good, I still feel like I'm a YouTuber at heart. And even though YouTube in itself is, even though it's the biggest platform, it's not the best when it comes to everything. Like, for instance, streaming, everyone goes to Twitch, and maybe for podcasts, people listen more on other websites or stuff. But like, I feel I started as a YouTuber, I came back to my YouTube channel. I I don't want to change that. So I think I'll stick to YouTube at least, kind of after pondering that question when it comes to expanding to other platforms. I guess another way I've also thought about improving the podcast is editing. So obviously for episode 1, it was just a title card of the All in All podcast episode 1, and that was it. And then just a black background. Nothing changed. That was literally just it. So I've thought about kind of doing some editing along with that. So maybe when I'm talking about a graph or some sort of study, I'll display it on screen. I don't know if that is something people kind of look for in a podcast, is visual aids or something like that. But there are a lot more video podcasts nowadays, at least in the YouTube sphere from what I'm seeing, because I look at podcasts like that I'm competing against on YouTube, and I'm not trying to imitate what they do, but I'm trying to just get a sense of like, okay, these are podcasts on YouTube. This is the standard that I'm trying to follow. And, some kind of do that sort of like little bit of editing in there, and that's maybe what I want to try to do. I don't know how many people would even like that because I don't even, I know my viewer base isn't, massive. It's quite small, but I'm still trying to look for ways to improve my podcast, even if I don't have a viewer base for the podcast yet, because to me, I'm already on episode 2 and I'm already thinking about future episodes, and maybe I don't have a viewer base for the podcast yet, but I hope to get one day. And if I do get one day, I want to provide them the best experience I can with my podcast. I've also thought about more kind of light-hearted topics or less serious topics, like doing a tier list, because I know that's popular or been popular on YouTube the past couple of years, of like podcasts that I listen to. I listen to, I would say, a good amount or a good variety of podcasts, like Joe Rogan podcast, PKA, Scuffed podcast. I listen to the RT podcast, Off Topic. I mean, I've listened to a lot of podcasts in my time, and I do keep up with a good amount of them today. So I've kind of thought about doing that topic as well on the podcast. I think that would also provide me with a good test episode when it comes to editing, because I can actually do some editing when it comes to that tier list video of podcast if I do an episode on that. I think that episode will be, I don't know, quite entertaining, at least from a standpoint of reviewing podcast and me giving my opinion on certain podcasts, if, how highly I rate them, and, kind of what I'm trying to do with mine. I'm not trying to imitate any podcast, but I am trying to at least get a sense of what people want to see, and also how to format it in a way people would want to see as well. So I hope that all made sense from a topic standpoint and also kind of a format standpoint for my podcast. But as always, I don't want to ramble on for too much longer. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, see ya.